All right, I'm joined here by Katie Melbourne. I don't know if you guys have checked out her episode yet, but if you haven't, check out the podcast. Katie, thanks for joining me again. I feel weird. I'm looking sideways. Gotta look at the camera.
No worries. I'm excited to be here. Cheers, virtually.
Cheers. Yeah. What are you drinking tonight?
So I live near and also climb near Four Noses, and so big fan of their raspberry blonde ale. That was my post race beer of choice as well. And what
So
about you?
to I'd rather not say, but there's a lot of it.
Cheers.
Uh
Yeah.
yeah, I'm in between beer sponsors right now. If any beer companies are listening. Um, no, but when we talked to you on the podcast, were you an Ultrarunner?
I was not yet. No, I was actually feeling a little imposter syndrome about that. I didn't know what it was like yet.
And that's why we're celebrating, because now you're an Ultrarunner.
Officially, yeah.
So congrats. Seriously, cheers.
Thank you.
Um, I can't wait to hear more about it here.
Mm-hmm. There's a lot
What
to talk about.
what race did you just finish?
Yeah, so
What mileage and what race was it?
I'm repping it right now. Prairie Spirit Trail Ultra in Kansas. So it started in Ottawa, Kansas, and ran all the way on a converted railroad path that was changed into a bike trail and I ran all the way down to Garnett, Kansas. So it was like a straight out and back 50-mile race. But they had four different types. So they had anywhere from a 50K to 100 options. So
So it was an out and back. That
yeah.
makes it interesting.
Um, yes, yeah. So I'd say the race itself was really well run by the runners and the organizers. It was very flat and very straight. So as you can imagine, an old rail trail path is just going to be straight as an arrow through cornfields. Luckily, there were some trees on either side that blocked the Kansas wind. But it was a small field, probably 400 people across all four races, and very, very, very straight. But yeah, it was a blast and very different from the Colorado scenery I'm used to.
So why did you pick this race out of every race on the planet to start off your ultra running career? Kansas, it could be challenging. It could be very challenging. And honestly, some of the flatter races I've done have hurt, as bad as the mountainous ones. Why Kansas? I mean, it's drivable, right?
It is drivable. So yeah, there were a couple reasons. COVID, obviously, I didn't know if there would be races at this time, even though I signed up in September and we were hopeful. I wanted to pick one that was really pretty small. Most ultras are, but this one was really small. I also wanted it to be in a small town. So we were able to stay in a literal just farm, basically Airbnb. And I ran by cows on my pre-race run, which was really fun. And I'm also a Midwesterner at heart. I'm from Iowa, so it was nice to like return home in a way. Kansas is basically like home because
Nice.
they're very similar. So
So,
and
I
then
mean,
flat and sea level. Those are the
for for
other.
people listening to this or watching this first and not having much background on you, they're missing all the good stuff too. Um, what was it like? I mean, how many longer races had you finished prior to this? And then I want to hear kind of pre-race jitters. I think me and you had mentioned that prior to. I don't know if that was um, just messaging each other or what, but I got to hear more about the pre-race jitters.
Pre-race jitters. Man, okay, so I have the type of brain that's like, all right, this is a crazy impossible goal. I'm gonna go chase after it and I make it happen. But this one was slightly more out of my depth, I think. I had only ever run two marathons. So I did a marathon in 2017, in 2018, had a really rough senior year of college and kind of lost a lot of my fitness. And then I moved to Colorado, barely being able to run a mile or two at this time last year. And then so I got my fitness back up, and by September I was running, my typical half distance and a little bit pushing a little bit further. I said, "What do you think would be a good goal that I'm not sure I can accomplish. That would take an entirely dedicated winter training months to accomplish it by the springtime. And I decided 50 miler was the goal because if I'd done marathons, of course, I could probably run a 50K then. And 50 miler just sounded like just impossible enough. So that's truly how I went from running a marathon 2 years ago, almost three at this point, to a 50 miler.
I
Yeah.
just recalled during that we were talking about telescopes or something to that effect, and that's when I was like, oh, okay, good. All you have to do is finish your race, and then we can do a follow up. Okay, I'm catching up here. Sorry.
No, you're good. I know. I was like, well, I got to finish this race so I can go, have a beer with Rob and set up a telescope. Because I know your kids are really excited about their telescope, and I've got one myself, and my boyfriend's really interested in astronomy as well. So we were like, yeah, we'll definitely help out with that. But I got to finish.
We need help. So glad you did your part on getting the race done. But I mean, in terms of nervousness, are you more nervous about James Webb being, you said not in focus, you said aligned or something like that?
Yeah.
Not a big responsibility for humanity or anything, but
Yeah.
um or taxpayers or however they funded it, I don't even know. um how's nerves compared to lining up for your first 50 miler, which seems impossible. When you signed up for it, it seemed impossible. Which, how do you compare those two nervousness type feelings?
That's a really interesting analogy, honestly. I I don't know. So, I mean, the 50 miler is just me, right? It feels, I mean, obviously, I've got a support crew. I've got my family and my coaches and people like you that I met along the way who are all cheering for me. So I felt pressure in that regard. But if I failed, ultimately, that would be something that I would own. Whereas with James Webb, it's, thousands and thousands of people have worked on this project over the course of years, decades. Um, so it feels more like we can't let each other down with that. But I would say, like, I like drawing the comparison between doing science and running is just like a lot of what you have to do to prepare for it is just make sure your documentation is 100%. Because when you're running um, the command module at 2 a.m. and you need to make a decision that will affect the telescope, you want to make sure your documentation is perfect. So similarly to ultras, you do all that work and bang your head against the wall for miles and miles and miles on end, or in our case, hours and weeks where we're just trying to prepare for this thing to launch. And then it does. So you really put in the groundwork in both. And the feeling is similar, while like the team aspect of it is a little different.
I like that, preparing for launch. I mean, that's perfect for ultra running and for your career. I don't know.
It's true. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah, it just gives you the sense of determination. I think I've always been very stubborn. And I got to see just how stubborn I was. But honestly, I probably would have quit had it not been for my crew. So there was definitely a team aspect there.
So when you're driving to the start line or just driving to the race, did you look at the speedometer? Did you look at the mileage? And did you clock off 50 miles and have any kind of nervous breakdown?
A little bit. Yeah. So my Airbnb was actually almost 40 miles from the start. It was about 35. Which was a mistake in retrospect. However, I liked where we stayed, so it ended up being okay. But it was like on the way there, I was like, oh my gosh, I'm gonna have to run further than this. And it took the car a really long time to get there. So how am I gonna get there? I don't know. So I definitely did that. And I don't think, after I'd already signed up, a couple of my friends said, well, that's almost 2 marathons in a day. And I guess I hadn't thought about it like that before. A 50-mile race is almost twice a marathon. But it seemed like a nice number to try to hit. So that's where I was. And I
You
was like,
secretly wanted to get out the marker board and be like, no, wait, let me double check your math. Yes,
yeah,
yes, you're right.
it is. I can't believe it is.
So, I mean, how did you cope with I don't know, sweaty palm, just holding the steering wheel, trying to drive, knowing what's about to take place. Did you have like a mantra that popped into your head? Because I find there's like so much you find out about yourself with what pops in your head out of nowhere when you put yourself in these kind of dire, like extreme situations. You find out so much though.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's why I'd want to do it again, is I honestly wish I would have maybe not reacted the way I did by mile 36. And I can tell you more about that. But at least for like going up to the start, I just was thinking about my high school coach in cross country and how they always used to say, our mantra is like, you can do more than you think you can. Because we'd have a lot of runners who joined cross country who had never run before. And they'd use cross country as a way of like, um, learning that skill and that growth mindset for fitness. In a team environment. And so they'd always tell us, you can do more than you think you can. And I started that tradition of like writing it on our hands. I don't know if I mentioned this in the podcast or not, but we'd write on each other's hands in Sharpie and say, you can do more than you think you can. So that was just like what I was kind of thinking about. And I actually got really lucky because they were sending us off in waves. So every 10 minutes, they'd have a section of that race start. So the 50 miler started at 6:30 a.m. and then again at 6:40, and like every 50 people every 10 minutes. And so you really just get up to the start and you're not waiting long. I was there for probably 2 minutes and then we got off. It was wild how fast it was. But then there was this woman who was running alongside me, and I instantly knew she was trying to go sub 10. I was trying to do sub 14. So I knew sub 14 hours. So I knew she was going to be way too fast for me, but I actually ran the first 3 miles with her until like the short little turnaround, because it helped me just settle those nerves. She had a great, she had a great attitude, great personality. We just talked for 3 miles. And then I said, I'm just going to let you go. But now we follow each other on Strava. So that kind of really helped me ease into the race and not think about quite the enormity of it in the first 3 miles, which would have freaked me out.
Yeah, no, I've been there quite a few times. The nervous conversations, like normally it's in the group before it starts, and then I don't know, you're either like massively socializing. I have a tendency of just kind of putting in headphones and trying to not do something stupid.
Yeah.
Because if I get caught up in a conversation 5 miles in and I'm like way below where I should be in terms of just running too fast, I should say.
Right.
That's been the hallmark of my worst races. So how did the next few miles go? How did getting to the half marathon mark go? Did you start off too fast, or
No.
you were
So, I
good?
mean,
You
for the
you
first
sound
3,
like you're disciplined.
yeah, it was kind of like a tactical. I know that with my brain, it's constantly a balance between brain and body. I think, everyone deals with that mental side, but I just know myself really well. And I know that that was going to be my downfall if I let it. So I kind of use that as like a tactical, like, okay, I'll like sacrifice a little bit of my strength here for like the first 3 miles just to get my brain out of the way. But honestly, it wasn't too much faster than my like normal, I'm going out for a 5 miler here. It was like 9:30s and I can handle that. And it was just like I couldn't handle that for 50 miles. So after that, I actually kind of just, watched the sunrise, listened to the birds. There was a lot of birds out there. So it's kind of sounded like the mornings when I was growing up. And I kind of settled into that. And yeah, honestly, the first 13 miles were great. I got into a really good rhythm of just like walking when I needed my food and fuel. I hydrated super well. I was drinking like a liter of water every hour and a half. So I was like doing pretty well with that, which I'd never been able to really do before, even though I'd tried to practice it. And I honestly didn't start, getting a little nervous about the distance I had remaining until I got to the turnaround at 27.3 miles. And that's when I was like, oh my God, I'm barely over halfway and my legs hurt. What am I going to do?
I mean, tell me more about that. And I'm impressed that you were walking to eat and hydrate and do that sort of stuff, because tendency is with flat races, people are like, I'm just going to run the entire time,
Yeah.
which is not like the normal ultra, which is part of the hardest part is honestly to untrain yourself, to force yourself to take those run break or those walk breaks. So tell me about mile 27 and turnaround. What was going on?
Yeah, with that whole breaking to walk thing, I think that's one of the benefits of me being super green is that I kind of had that as an excuse. It's like, well, I've never even run a 50K. So like it's fine if this goes really poorly or if I'm really slow. So I was kind of had that in my brain. But then the turnaround, I realized, it had taken me almost not quite 5.5 hours, 5 hours and 15 minutes or so to get to mile 27.3. And then I quickly realized that if I were to slow down a lot and say walk the rest of it, I would be out there until at least 8:30 p.m. And the thought of doing a 14-hour day, just like I think I had prepared for it in my mind, but I hadn't actually prepared for it. I had vocalized it where it was like, I'm aiming for 14 hours. It could be longer. If I'm lucky, it'll be shorter. But I don't think I realized just how long that is. And so I freaked out and actually called one of my best friends who lives in San Francisco during that point. And I was like, I can't calm down. My breath is just like all over the place. And she just told me stories until I could calm down enough to walk at least. And I was like, I'm just gonna make it to the next aid station and then think about that. So I made it to mile 36.3, and that's when my pacer came in, my boyfriend. So
Nice. I mean, part of doing, mountainous remote races are that you can't do that. And then you find yourself digging even more internally to see what happens, what method you end up using to pull yourself out. But it sounds like distraction seems to have definitely been helpful for you.
yeah, that's a really good point. Yeah, and that's why I kind of, I'm just going to be really vulnerable about what I did and how I reacted to it. And I'm not super proud of my mental strength during that. And I think that when I continue looking ahead at what races I want to do in the future, I think mental training is going to be an even bigger aspect of my game, because I kind of broke down multiple times on the course. And I was lucky that my boyfriend had volunteered to walk with me because, or to it was supposed to be run. I ended up walking a lot of the back half. And I think that's okay because I was just determined to get to the end, honestly.
Yeah.
And because it was a little bit big of a step up for me to have my last longest mile, training run being 24 miles. That was my biggest training day before a 50-mile race. So I just wasn't prepared for what I was going to be feeling at mile 36. I think the strength was there, but the mental game was not at all.
Yeah, typically 24 miles for a 50 miler is plenty.
Really?
But if you haven't experienced it, then you don't really know what you're in store for. And
Yeah.
yeah. And I say distraction before as kind of a positive thing to have found out, because there's a lot of ways you can distract yourself when you're out there running. So it's just a matter of having the right podcast lined up, ready to go, or that new album you downloaded onto your phone and you're not going to listen to it until you hit a low point or whatever you need. There's a lot of tricks. There's a lot of flavored gels you can, or a candy bar even, you can have that little carrot when you need it.
Yeah.
So what was it like when you saw your boyfriend?
Yeah. Just going back to that, I think the toughest part was that the race itself did not distract me. The path was straight as an arrow, like I said. So I couldn't at least look at the scenery because the scenery was pretty much the same in all directions. So that was tricky. But yeah, seeing my
Like being
boyfriend,
on a treadmill.
it was like being on a treadmill. And I honestly think I would have benefited from some more just I'm going to tough out some boring miles on the treadmill. And I think that would benefit me in any type of race. So I might add that in and see in the future. But yeah, so my parents were there. Actually, they drove down from Iowa. My boyfriend drove with me from Colorado, and he was going to run with me. And so when we started out, I like almost started panicking again. I did panic again because of like how far we had. So he started at mile 36.3. And he's very good at, I'm just shocked that he was able to handle me, completely just breaking down on him emotionally. I was at the point where I hadn't slept well due to the like shootings in Boulder earlier in the week and just a bunch of stuff happening this week leading up into the race. So I was at the point where I would see a soft grassy field and I would turn to Jacob and I'd be like, I just want to lay down in this field. Like, why do I have to keep going? I just want to take a nap. And he's like, well, you could take a nap, but you're not going to get back up if you do that. So you might as well just keep pushing forward and think that every step is a win. So yeah, so that's kind of where he was helpful, is he's like, just every step is another win and another step closer to the finish.
I mean, that's amazing. I mean, so did you guys do that for the next, was it, how many miles was the actual race? And then how did the
miles? It
how
was the
much?
last 13 and a half miles.
13 and a half?
Alternating, crying, trying to jog, kind of failing at that, walking and doing all this at the same time. And you also learn a lot about what your body needs when it's telling you certain things. So for me, obviously, like when I was crying, it was like low blood sugar. Okay, I need to eat something. But sometimes my stomach would be too upset and I'd say, no, I'm not going to eat that Uncrustable that he's like trying to hand to me. I was like, no, I can't eat it right now. My stomach's too upset. But when my stomach was upset, that means I needed salt. And I found that once I took salt, I felt much better. I was able to eat my like little sandwich. And then my head just cleared up. It was very weird. You learn these body patterns.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Exactly
I'm
right.
sure you're the same. Like, I'm sure different food reacts differently for you
It's like
too.
blood flow optimization. Your body knows exactly what to do, and you just have to kind of listen, or at least gain experience enough to.
But man, hormones are crazy. Like, they just kind of, your body goes into fight or flight, and then you just have to. It's totally new. If you haven't experienced that much before, it's totally new to try to learn to adapt to that.
Yeah, I mean that's something I haven't really explored. Just the difference between male and female ultra runners and how those differences, affect each racer. So did you have any point in that last half marathon distance that things felt good?
Whenever I was within about 3 miles to the next aid station, so there were at 36.3 was the second to last crude aid station. So where there was like actual support and food. There were a couple like just water stops where you could fill up your bag with no one there in between, which I don't really count as like being an aid station. But once I knew I was about 2 miles away from being able to sit down, my body and like eat some mashed potatoes, my body stopped like the panic mode. So I found that helped. And also just like starting to talk about things that were not running related. So I'm thinking that like in the future, I want to get to the point where I can be kind of more self-supported in a race like this. Like ultimately, I would love to run an ultra where it's just me and I send drop bags and like really, try to challenge myself mentally in that way. But I think
hard. It's really hard.
The strategy would be to just like totally step away from running and like listen to like a John Mulaney album, like stand-up comedy kind of thing, where it's like, oh, this is totally removing me from thinking about running. Because even some of my podcasts were running related or like body related. I was listening to a book on like stress and hormones, and like that's not helpful. Like then I just get more stressed out. So
like fast forwarding to the chapters of like how to handle low points with like
yeah, it's not helpful to like
your audio
psychoanalyze in the middle of a breakdown.
Yeah, for me it's tempo of the music, but I find trying to get into flow as super beneficial and like different types of flow for myself, because when I'm hurting I can just turn my brain off and it reduces those pain signals enough to make it bearable for 5, maybe even 10 miles. Beyond 10 miles, it doesn't matter like if you're able to fully meditate 100%, like it sucks.
Yeah.
But
Yeah. So I'm curious about the experience of running overnight because as soon as it started getting dark, I was like, I don't know how the people who are out and committed to the 100 miler are doing this. And there was even, I have mad respect to the last finisher of the 50 miler because she finished it in 22 hours. But to have the like guts to keep going when you're doing a 50
yeah,
miler and it takes you 22 hours to do that, and you know it's going to take you that long, and you're committed to finishing at 4 in the morning, like that is some strength. So I'm
it's a
curious about like
lot of time
your
on your
what
feet.
you've learned about like yourself mentally and that mental challenge of like going all night because I cannot imagine doing a race longer than
It's
50 miler
so
race.
this sounds kind of weird, but it's not like the first night that's the hard one. It's the second one and the third one.
Fair.
But once you have to practice it. So everyone's like initially they're like, I'm fearful of running in the woods at nighttime, myself included. That freaked me out, having never really grown up in the wilderness and, done that kind of thing. And it's just like training your body physically. It's a mental aspect that is trained and learned. It's like
Right.
public speaking. You're not just going to be good at night running.
Yeah.
Um, I think having the right light makes a big difference, but then learning the body's rhythm through that also, and timing caffeine and food.
Yeah.
And then there's also the aspect of sweating all day in the sun, and then all the salt on your body building up, and knowing like when you got to just like suck it up and do a baby wipe like bath. Like you just have
Yeah.
to get all the salt off, or you chafe like no other, and then that turns into its own mess. Like you literally, you hurt so bad that it becomes its own pain uh bin that you're dealing with. So you're not only like physically exhausted, but then you're like, chafing. um but yeah, I don't know if there's any real trick, other than there is no trick. You just have to learn, you just have to train and do it.
Yeah.
And just be cognizant of the fact that like you get tired at certain points. So time out uplifting things like good music and hot food. I think like the coolness sometimes can like slow you down and just kind of like bring you down enough that
Yeah.
something as simple as like a cup of soup can really benefit you. And then my last thought is just when you're super tired at nighttime and you go in an aid station, you're just like, I want caffeine, give me a cup of coffee. Like you're thinking first level, and then you got to think next, like kind of next step or two ahead. So
Mhm.
coffee like will dehydrate you
But you have
really
to,
bad.
yeah, you have to
So
drink more.
yeah, you need to be thinking not only like the first initial thoughts, but then like, okay, if I do this, how is it going to affect my body? So if I need caffeine, is coffee actually the best idea, or is there another source that I could use so that I don't have to then like course correct from trying to course correct?
Right. Yeah. That
A
makes
lot of that is probably James Webb type thinking that I know you're going to put to good use when it's slightly off and out of focus and it's nighttime, and then there's a user error.
yeah, there's gonna be a lot of like immediate how do we settle the problem and then how do we, recover from there. So yeah, but luckily, like I said, that's gonna be a lot more like no decision will be made without a giant team. So I definitely won't be the one making any final decisions. If I'm lucky, I'll get to sit on shift for a lot of it, but I don't know how that's
I
gonna
think
play.
it's sweet.
Yeah, we'll see. But that is overnights too. And if I can do overnights in an observatory, maybe I can run an overnight race sometime.
believe it or not, there's parallels. There's a lot of parallels. And I wrote about driving across the country in my book, but um, having like the mental ability to not do something physical and just mentally stay up for 24 hours or 36 hours and sense like what's the rhythm of my brain and how's my body changing, how's my focus changing, where's my breaking point. Hopefully you don't experience that in a car, that's not safe. But
Yeah, not good.
um like mentally you can train yourself to do a heck of a lot better physically during these races. So there actually is there will be a benefit if you can run 24 hours. I guarantee you, as long as, yeah, I hate saying guarantee, um you will be a better web operator at nighttime if you can learn your physical body's rhythms uh
Yeah.
for a 24-hour period,
Yeah.
honestly.
Yeah, I like that idea a lot because I've had to go observing, on ground-based observatories several times. And, that's like a total flip of the switch. Same with ultra running. You're not like, I'm assuming you're not staying up all night in preparation for your ultra, like the week before. Do you normally keep a normal sleeping schedule?
uh yeah, my body during 200s acted kind of weird. It wanted, I felt like I wanted to stay up more than normal.
Mm,
But yeah, once I got one or two under my belt, I was like, I just want to bank sleep as much as possible.
yep.
And so it's not the night before the race, it's the important one. It's actually the night before that. So
Yep.
I knew if Thursday night I had a good night's sleep, I could basically totally botch Friday night and Saturday's race would be fine.
Yep.
Um,
Yeah, I think that was my issue. The nights leading up to the night before were not great. Um, just you know, packing for the race and everything that was happening locally, I just was not in the right mindset to sleep well. So I think that's something I'd want to focus on. But yeah, I mean, with observing you turn on the drop of a hat, like I was used to in school when, I flew to Hawaii from Connecticut, observed for a few days and then flew back and like had to adjust accordingly. It's really interesting what your body does at that point, but it's capable of a lot more than you think. But one thing that I kept repeating when I was really, really upset was like, bodies aren't meant to do this. Why do people do this? And my boyfriend was just like, I don't know. I never want to do this. I just think it's like, I don't know. I have this incessant need to do crazy things. And now I got a sense of what it feels like to actually do something that a very small percentage of people in the world have done. And it's really hard. And I don't know when, like what my next race will be, but I always say like a couple days after the race is when I, feel better, my body feels better, my mind feels better, and I instantly forget the pain I was in and want to sign up for another,
at
even
least
though
you're
I was like,
smart. At
"Oh,
least you're
okay."
smart enough to realize it.
Yeah.
It probably took me a year of that routine to figure out like, oh, I'm forgetting a lot of the downs, and you have kind of a selective memory. And naturally, I think all humans do, or else we probably wouldn't be around.
True.
We remember a lot of the good ones instead of a lot of the bad ones. So
Right. Yeah. That's a good thing overall.
I mean,
Um,
my one comment, and I'm not like a big proponent of pushing drugs on people, but caffeine timed out correctly is very important. Kyle Pietari taught me anytime that my body wanted caffeine to take it. Um, I was learning from one of the best. And then I found that melatonin actually really, really helps. So I try not to use melatonin at all until basically race week, and then time that out so that I'm guaranteeing myself a good night's sleep a lot of times. Um,
yeah, I like that. I know melatonin has worked for me before, to get really good night's sleep. But again, I only use it when I'm super desperate and haven't slept well in a while. But I think I need to know like what amounts work for me and things like that before I race.
Yes, you don't want to
I
overdo
don't
that
think
before a
I've
race. That'd be really bad.
It'd be so bad. I don't think I had any caffeine in me besides what I was eating from my gels. And honestly, I got so sick of the gels really quickly after like the marathon was done. Basically, I was like, no more goose. I'm done. Which was dumb. I like switched to gummies and stuff, which like don't have the same amount of caffeine. I found goldfish were my like superhero drug of choice. It was like the extra flavor blasted goldfish. My mom bought like a giant box of them and brought them, and then like they put them in little sandwich bags and be like, want one for the road? And that was like phenomenal for some reason. But yeah, caffeine, I definitely needed more of that, I think. Especially when I got to the end where I was just like sleep.
When it gets cold, I think is probably when you hit that low. At what mile did it get dark? And did you put a headline?
Not until about like mile 40, like 6. So I was pretty close at that point. Maybe even 48. Because the sun set for a really long time. I was only running in the dark for about 45 minutes, I think.
It was to your back, so that's nice. I mean, I'm assuming.
I was headed north.
I actually don't know the direction. I pictured it one way. You're headed north, so it was never in your face, really.
To the side. Yeah.
Okay. So what was it like going for that last mile? Knowing like you're gonna become a 50-mile finisher, like you had set your target on this for quite some time.
Yeah.
Was it emotional or were you drained to the point where you didn't have emotion left?
Well, I was just kind of chatting with, because my boyfriend was walking with me at that point, and I was still walking, and I was like trying to shuffle along, but I couldn't really.
That's good. So he's still your boyfriend at mile 49.
I'm shocked. He stuck it out.
Went well.
Yeah, he's a good one. Seriously, I would have quit without him, but he was like just so calm. And I don't think a lot of people could handle their girlfriend crying for like multiple hours and like complaining about how badly their feet were cut up and how their hips hurt and everything without like getting mad. But he was just so calm. Anyway, he's phenomenal. Which
Congrats
also
to him.
Yeah, I agree.
He made it.
It also makes me feel a little bit bad about being like, well, maybe now I want to do another, because I know that experience was like just so bad for him having to listen to me. So that's why I'd want to get my brain to the point where I could handle something like maybe at least a 50K on my own first. Anyway, so last mile, I definitely was just distracting myself with where's the finish line. I was like, I cannot see it. I know it's behind that barn somewhere. I was like, where is it? It cannot be further than this. So I think I was so distracted by that. But I had these thoughts in between where it's like, I don't have a specific body-based goal now. And it's really weird to have gone like, 7 months where this is my number one focus with my training, to not have that anymore. And the other really cool thing that happened was I noticed that this is kind of related, but not really. In the next couple of days, like I have a lot of like body image issues, and the next couple of days, I did not like. Even now, I'm just like, I cannot hate my legs because they just did that really cool thing, and that's exactly what I was thinking that night. It's like, I cannot blame myself, or like think I should look a certain way, because like you see a bunch of people out on the course with a bunch of different looks and a bunch of different body types. And it's like, what's the point in hating yourself when it can just do really, really cool things? So like, I want that feeling again of like, I'm going to chase that feeling of being like, yeah, my body's powerful. And like, I'll respect it by like by being choosy about what I put in it. But like, I'm not going to like hate on it as much as I did before, I think, because it did such a cool thing.
It's awesome. That's really awesome.
So that was like all kind of going through my head at once. It's like, oh my God, this is over. Oh my God, where's the finish? Oh my God, that was really cool. It was basically those three thoughts over and over.
And I mean, the second you passed the finish line, was it like, because me personally, I'm like, I need recoverite. My legs are screaming. Like I always have like a bottle of water and the Recoverate's the hammer product that I always use. Um, was it like get food in me or like keep food away from me? Like, mom, dad, I do not need more goldfish. Like, like tell me more about that. How was it getting a metal belt buckle? I don't even
Oh
know.
yeah. Actually, so the belt buckles were held up in customs, so it's like on my way. It'll get here in like 2 days. To me, I think they had like a limited number that made it through because like the first finishers got one, I think, and then they're sending out the rest.
They're coming through the Suez Canal.
Yeah, yeah, they've been blocked. But yeah, and so I got a sticker and I got like some cool pictures and stuff. I think I was just kind of like in shock, but like physically, the only thing I wanted, I was like, I don't want food. I was like, I could do with some water, but I wanted to sit down so badly. I was like, I don't care if I can't move at the end of this 40-minute car ride home. I'm just gonna sit in the car. And I could not move. I got out of the car and was like, yeah, I'm just gonna like hobble over to the door. It's just take the slowest amount of time. The issue is my feet were so swollen, they didn't even look like my own feet. I was not ready for that. And I also wasn't ready. I had not changed anything with my socks or shoes. And the bottom of my feet, like the pad of the top of my right foot, actually got this giant blister under it that popped in mile like 35. And so I like was like wincing in the shower when the hot water hit it. I was like, oh my God, this is like almost
Well, if you didn't
pain that I
scream,
was in.
if you didn't scream, it wasn't a good race. Like when you
No, it
jump in the
pretty much was,
shower.
yeah, wincing was a kind word. It was, yeah.
Um, is it amazing that your body forgets how to operate after the finish line? How like you can
Yeah.
easily go that last 50 yards in, and then once you sit down and your brain's like, okay, I'm done. Like your physical body just decides to shut off
Oh yeah.
completely. Like,
Oh yeah. It was insane, like just how quickly it shut down. And I think a little bit of that was happening at aid stations, which is something I'd want to work on too, is like it was actually really hard, not as much mentally to get up from the aid station because the aid station would help give me like a mental break. But as soon as I'd start again and realize how tight my legs were, that's when my mind was like, oh crap, because the aid station would help with my brain, but not my body. My legs would get so tight, and it would take me like another mile just to like get them to be able to move again. So
yeah, a
I
lot
don't
of
even know how to
people
do that.
for 100 miles, well, under 100 miles, so maybe even 100K, like they make a rule no sitting down. And
Yeah.
like that's why there's all the jokes about like the chair being the evil chair, because once you sit down you don't want to get up. And it's even worse when you're at like mile 80 during a 100 miler. It's pitch dark out, you're by a campfire, you have a bunch of like really nice people, you're all hanging out.
And you just want
that's
to
that's
like,
when the chair becomes just a full-blown disaster. But yeah, for 50 miles and 100K, even a lot of people just decide, they make up their mind like no sitting down, because exactly what you're talking about, it's so hard to get up. And then even once you do, it takes a while to remember how
I
to
think that's
run.
gonna be, if I ever do it again, I think that's gonna be number one rule. I say that, I say this, if I'm only ever gonna do it again, only because I was so adamant about not doing it again when I was at mile 40. I was like, Jacob, never let me do this because I was so grumpy. And I also felt so bad for what I was putting him through that I felt like I had to say that to encourage him to keep encouraging me and not be mad at me. If that makes
So
sense.
I'm trying to think about how many times I said that to myself.
Oh, that makes
I
me
would
feel better.
say
I'm like, shoot,
I,
this is
I think on average it's at least once or twice per 50 miles. So just you do the math, whatever race it is. You basically quit as an ultra runner at some points. And yeah, it's
good to know.
totally normal. Totally normal. Um,
But I
I
feel very
mean,
like indoctrinated into this group now. I feel like that was like my initiation. Obviously, it was an initiation of some sort. But now that I've like been a part of this community and I'm following all these ultra runners I met on the course, like on Strava now, and I'm like talking to you and like, talking to my coworker who's done it. It's like, ooh, did I just get bit by the bug? Maybe. I think I
well,
did.
you're not on ultra sign up yet. So, and you've had a vaccination, so I mean, even more reason to be on Ultra sign up.
Bad idea to get a
Regardless
vaccine on
of the
Monday.
listeners, viewers' thoughts on that, I mean, that's just an excuse, possibly, right? Like,
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, I got vaccinated on Monday. My first vaccine the week before the race, which like I thought that would be enough time, but I was pretty groggy on Tuesday, so maybe that contributed to my lack of sleep. So maybe not a great idea in retrospect.
yeah, it's interesting. You're probably one of the few people on the planet that actually took your first, did a 50 miler in the middle, and then did second, right?
Probably. Yeah, not my second.
Statistically, I'm going to say you're definitely in the 1% of the vaccinated that have tried that.
True. So yeah, we'll see. I know that the second one's probably going to lay me out, so I'm waiting on that. But now I got to figure out what goal is next. I think elevation gain is involved for sure, because man, your legs cramp up in a different way on flat. So I think I'm looking. I have my eye on some Colorado trail races, probably a shorter trail race to start, and then we'll see. We'll see from there.
Thinking Quad Rock 25 miler followed up with I don't know. I'll have to follow up on the follow up to that. But
Yeah.
doing a 50K as a follow up, I like it. And I really like the idea that you're trying to be self-supported and go learn those avenues. And honestly, you'll learn a lot about yourself going that route.
Yeah.
Also, but a 50K with vert, like even Leadville Marathon that I have coming up, don't underestimate how much vert affects, like, mentally. You feel like Leadville Marathon is more like a 40 miler, especially when altitude is involved too.
Right.
So when there's less oxygen, your heart's pumping a lot harder. That simple, would you say 9:30 pace, it feels more like you're running 8-minute pace or 8:30 pace, just because your heart rate's so much higher.
Yeah.
Unless you're acclimated. And yeah, the climbing, just the amount of calories, the amount of goldfish it takes to do big climbs is like exponentially higher. So it's a whole different world, but I think you'll enjoy the change up from like the monotony of just kind of straightaway path.
Yeah, for sure.
So I'll be excited to see what you end up picking. Would you have changed anything about your race? I hope we have enough time here. Okay, we're coming up on it.
Yeah. Would I have changed like the way I ran it or the way I prepared?
Anything about your race? What would you have changed in retrospect?
I think I would have done a little bit more research on like just a little bit more of my own personal experimentation on the things like caffeine, because I didn't know how important they would be. I'm really proud of how well I hydrated, because I knew that was going to be a struggle for me and I really prioritized it. But I think also leading up to it, I think I would have done a little bit more strength in my last couple weeks, strength training, because I got really into climbing. So I was like, oh, that counts as strength training. Not the same thing. Ended up getting runner's knee about 2 weeks before, and then like was super conservative. So I think that was challenging in my last 2 weeks about nerves being like, oh my God, is my knee going to be okay? Turns out it was totally fine. Those couple days off really helped. But I think focusing on the strength training consistently, pushing that a little bit harder, and doing a little bit more research on like a course that inspires me is something I would probably change. Because I chose this course because I thought it would be easy and I thought it would be a place where my family could like meet up, and it was. But I think choosing a course with a little bit more inspiration behind it, like, oh, I really want to be there because of XYZ view, or this particular mountain or summit I want to like do in the middle of the race, like that would be a really cool way to approach it in the future.
What lessons from the race will you apply when James Webb is up off this planet in orbit? Is there a lesson or two that you'll apply so that humanity can see the universe more clearly and not out of focus and cause another spaceship to have to go up and do all the corrections that I'm just,
Yeah.
that
So,
was
I
a
mean, the
nerd. That
tricky
was the
part is
worst
James
nerd
Webb
joke I think I've ever had.
I mean, the tricky part is James Webb is not serviceable, right? So once it goes up, it is
Oh,
up
it's not.
there.
Oh,
Mm-mm. Yeah, so it like is orbiting at a point where it's like not like Hubble where we can't get to it. So as far as like just I think what I bring to my team and what I tend to bring in races and didn't necessarily bring in this race is just how much a good attitude can totally turn things around, because I was really grateful for the people who made me smile in the course, even if it was the littlest way. Like a dude named Jason giving me a thumbs up at an aid station, and like a guy named Chris kind of chatting with me and being like, we're going to get there. Like, this is a lot, but it's my first two and we're going to get there. And, people trying to learn your name so that when they turn around and like you pass them at the turnaround, they're like, oh yeah, go Katie. Like that was really cool. And I think that's what I can bring to my team, is that like excitement and enthusiasm about the scientists I know who are going to be using James Webb to do their science, as well as just like how excited I am to be working on this after 20 years of imagining myself as an astronomer. So yeah, I think that kind of like good attitude is what I'm going to bring to future races, or try to bring to future
I like
races,
it.
and to James Webb.
Positive mind frame. You solve problems that I truly think a negative mind frame cannot solve. I think your IQ actually goes up by being positive, as weird as it sounds. No, telling yourself you can do something actually raises your IQ.
Yeah,
Um,
sure.
and so, last question: what advice do you have for someone who has only done 2 marathons and a handful of halves, and has this Kansas City Ultra that they just found on Ultra Sign Up, and it has 50 miles on it, and their fingers on the trigger on the mouse?
Yeah.
What advice do you have for them?
Um, no goal is too crazy, but it's going to get really hard. So I'd say if you decide to go for it, I 100% support you. I don't regret a single thing. Um, B, in those long runs when you're like, it wouldn't matter if I cut this to 2 miles short, or it wouldn't matter if I like don't do that extra hour of walking that my coach says I should at the end, or I decided that I should at the end of my long run. Do it, because it will benefit you so much knowing that you pushed an extra hour in your long run and you were able to do that when you were dead tired in your actual race. So that's my advice for actually training for it. But sign up for an impossible goal, because there are ways to achieve that goal. And if you follow a dedicated plan and have a support group around you, you can absolutely do it. So I'm excited about doing more, and I'm really excited for people who are getting into races,
Well,
even if it's just a half. So
yeah,
my
yeah,
friends,
exactly. It's all relative. Um, Congrats on becoming an ultra runner. It's so cool to follow up this way. And I can't wait to meet you and your boyfriend in person. My kids are in desperate need of fine tuning their telescopes.
we got you.
So stay in touch, and I can't wait to hear what's up next for you. So thanks for taking all your time.
Thank you, Rob. Have a good one.